Welcome back again. Here you will find selected pages from a larger document on the trustedcommunications.com website dealing with the life of Lugalis Sidgmal, the man who was the chief engineer, CE, for the Atlantis Society leading up to and covering the destruction of Atlantis. His story reflects the Atlantean view of the stories of Atlantis in contrast to the Nephilim thread, which details the creation, running, and destruction as seen from the alien Nephilim perspective. Lugalis had a personal nickname of LG. This video does not contain the entirety of the story of Lugalis Sidgmal, or developing portions of it will always be current and up to date on the website. So this is a snapshot in time of sorts. For those who wonder, why is his name the way it is? Both the first and last name are slight variations of word terms from a Sumerian English word dictionary. The word name Lugalis is close to the Sumerian word for chief and Sidgmal is close to the Sumerian word for builder. There is no Sumerian word for engineer as is known in modern-day languages. So, wherever you see the name Lugalis Sidgmal, think in English chief engineer. In his time frame and naming customs, top-level people were always addressed by their job title, never by any combination of a personal name and a family name or a clan or guild name. The orientation and intended audience for this content is for people who do film script writing, i.e., screen script writers, rather than the general audience. The intended goal of this entire story set is to take the story to film in a major motion picture, rather than for the writing and selling of books, though that may still happen. In total, there is enough story material for 3 films, a science fiction movie, a documentary, and a love story. Time periods. Many years after the establishment of Atlantis in the Red Sea, see the GE graphic. Start of LG's career after his father has died or retired. The day of the destruction of Atlantis, about 7.5 thousand years ago. Some days after the destruction events were fully completed. 10 years after the destruction, see the Kelly-Steen treatment, a 1-page film treatment. Getting into the story properly. The bulk of this Atlantis-era story centers around the chief engineer and his duties in establishing the transport device and making it operational. The device and its peer up in orbit supported getting people and aliens on and off Earth without the use of chemical-based rockets. The peer device was attached to a space station that was once positioned in synchronous orbit above the underneath in present-day Kenya, on the equator just south of the Atlantis island in the Red Sea. There are side stories about his sequence of wives and 2 twin daughters. The twin daughters had a mission from God-like purpose within the society, but were not yet mature at the time of the fall of Atlantis. Had the fall not happened, then their mission was to change the character of the society to skirt the schism issues tearing the society apart. They ran out of time to fulfill their mission. There are several scene events for the chief engineer. Lugalis had several wives during his lifetime with some overlapping marriages. The Nikya early wife took advantage of the free agent status of women and left Lugalis out of disgust just after Lugalis was installed in office. See the research paper for details on free agency status of women in Atlantis. Lugalis starts out wanting success for the Nephilim in their migration and uplift duties, as regards the harvesting of human emotion, but ends up doing a 180 bringing about the destruction of Atlantis out of concerns for the well-being of humanity versus the interest of the Pleiadians. He sacrifices his family, friends, co-workers, and ultimately himself in bringing about the destruction of the island. This step also satisfies the desires of spirit in halting the otherwise uncheckable progress of the Order of the Self group in pressing forward with specialty life creation. The major story events about Lugalis and wife Lukar. Lugalis was installed as the chief engineer, builder, of Atlantis. The TD was his baby. Lugalis was admonished for failure to complete hangar preparations on time. Lugalis contemplates suicide at the unfinished hangar, Lukar at his side. An angel intercedes regarding LG's despair and thoughts of suicide. Lugalis completes the hangar preparation work, Lukar and others attend a ceremony. Lugalis presides at a hangar commissioning ceremony with aliens in attendance. The day of installation, Lugalis and Lukar crying at the residence. Lugalis meets with his staff people. Start of the install process, many are watching. Lugalis does initial functional tests. Luker fears an accident will kill him. Test out is finished successfully. The words of a stranger event at a topside meeting. Evening services, aspirants, visit by a man from the future. All of the KA Atlantean people in this description are, by default, pre-fall KA era Anunnaki, largely similar in nature to the post-fall KA era Anunnaki like Enlil, Ea, and Enki, though this is not particularly important. The problem facing Enlil and others was that they did not have enough of their kind to propagate with. They ran into problems of inbreeding due to a diminished population of other Anunnaki and eventually died out. There is no spelling out in this paper of activities and actions taken by the alien Nephilim prior to this part of the story. Yes, the story is incomplete in that respect. See the other documents for those details. Just understand that there are KA Atlantean genetically enhanced humans made by the Nephilim, along with genetically unenhanced humans which are the targets of a motion harvesting machine placed in service after the transport device is installed. The concept and practice of uplift is central to this entire story. See the David Brin story of Sundiver. Who was Lugalis and what did he have to do? Lugalis was a later son of the prior chief engineer, Lugalis Sidgmal. Lugalis, AG nickname, was a master of the power crystals, production, use, maintenance, and application. Power crystals pull energy from the zero-point vacuum and store the energy which can later be converted to electricity, both variants AC/DC, but without the Angus antics. There were older brothers to LG, but none of them had any real interest in the job or were not found to be acceptable to the Nephilim for one reason or another. They are not important to the story. The four-letter groups enclosed in parentheses below reflect a temperament bias orientation that normally goes with the identified job function. This is the Myers-Briggs or please understand me labeling mechanism. Alan is INTJ, so-called mastermind. LG as the chief engineer, CE, had a broad spectrum of responsibilities. One architect, INTJ, responsible for designing the overall strategy of the population relocation and the technology required to achieve the move. More pre-Atlantis stuff. 2 Civil engineer, ITJ, responsible for shaft excavation, some roads, bridges, buildings, and most importantly excavation of the transport complex, hangar, corridors, rooms, controls, doors. 3 Electrical engineer, INTJ, responsible for creation and maintenance of the electrical power grids, telecommunications. 4 Politician, ESP, the CE job also held a seat of a triumphant sharing administrative duties with 2 other council members who ruled in an authoritarian semi-dictatorship over the KA citizens of the society. The society was not a democracy, but more like a military arm of the Nephilim presence. 5 CEO, MBTI, not specific, maybe ESTX, administrator of a workforce having top-level section heads, something similar to an HR group, however not a payroll department as the society did not have money or salaries to pay in the normal sense of the word as we know it. People worked for food, position, and very long lives, 10k years or more. 6 Scientists, INTP, he had to have a native understanding of alien technology and be able to diagnose problems and generate solutions and repairs as needed. LG had a lot on his plate and most of what he knew came from his memories of previous lives working the Nephilim population transfer problem. His Kiersi temperament is most likely INTJ, but the Enneagram number is unknown. Lugalis and Nikia. First, some details about the broken relationship between Lugalis and Nikia. There are aspects of this story description that are very weak on my part, I admit this. Maybe I will generate more details as time and interest permit. See a painting of Nike by the past Russian artists Eugene Berman. This is a painting of the back of a woman in a red dress with white trim and a blood-red sheer veil-like head covering extending down her back as if it were her long hair. Lugalis has a final glimpse of Nikia as she turns her back on him and departs. The painting of Nike is very close to his last glimpse. The nature of the breakup issue between Lugalis and Nikia is still much in question. I believe Nikia left Lugalis with legitimate reasons, rather than out of jealousy with respect to the other wives, or past enticing offers from those who worked against Lugalis and his understanding of his responsibilities. My sense is that this was more about their past life marriage problems which were recreated during the Atlantis experience. This was long before the so-called Words of a Stranger event that happened years later up in a topside conference room. Nikia, had she stayed with Lugalis, might have then had a fuller understanding of what was going on with him, and secondarily with the society. A scene occurs between LG and Nikia on a sea-exposed wharf of the Atlantis island. Imagery feels like the North Shore. Wharf is a poor word, dockside may be a better term. The dock is composed of stonework, flat where they are standing and sloping inwards at the inside edge. There was much more to the actual dock than displayed in the imagery, so the description here is just about a very small portion of the structure. LG is having a fight with Nikia where she is telling him of her displeasures and decision to leave him, though she does not say where or with who, more details yet to follow. Camera angle stuff is mostly shot over his right shoulder, from behind LG and off to his right with most of the focus on Nikia and what is going on with her. Nikia is working a torch-like device which she shines on the wharf stonework and shows LG some images. Speculation: the torch device is like a handheld video projector. She then hands the torch to LG and asks that he shine it on her. She turns her back on LG, presenting the Nike painting image, and starts to walk off to an unseen set of steps leading down from the wharf. LG shines the torch light at her and she goes poof and disappears from sight. Lugalis and wife Luker. Lugalis was admonished for failure to complete the hangar preparations on time. Background: Lugalis as the somewhat new chief engineer had one primary task and a slew of secondary tasks that fluctuated in importance over time. The primary task was to get the transport device, TD, installed, activated, and placed in near continuous use. The transport device resided in a hangar excavated out of the south side of a large mesa, a vertical face of the mesa which ended inside a lake. A special requirement of the hangar preparation was that the floor of the hangar had to be flat, level, and perfectly smooth, covering an area of about 30 yards wide by 120 yards long. The transport machine was 30 feet wide by 300 feet long, flat on the bottom, 1/2 sphere capped, and 1/2 cylinder looking. Think of a cylinder 300 feet long capped off by hemispheres then cut lengthwise along its center line with the flat side facing down and capped off by a flat plate. The major problem Lugalis encountered, or more properly his workforce encountered, was that the hangar floor had to be machined flat over the extended distance to a degree not seen in modern-day technology. While his support personnel really did the floor preparation work, it was up to Lugalis to generate and implement techniques and fixes should any problems arise. Called on the carpet. A time came when Lugalis was called topside to the orbiting space station that operated the pier equipment and space-side departure and arrival platforms. Lugalis was admonished for his failure to complete the hangar floor preparation sooner than was practical for him and his organization. Aspects of this scene are similar to the war room in the Doctor Strangelove movie where there is a round table with above lighting in an otherwise rather dark room. In the center of the round table is a 3D display mechanism in which appears the image of the head Nephilim Anunnaki who supervises the downside ground operations, habitat and work constructions. The issue in place is that a failure to get the transport device working to spec would leave the Nephilim in a position of not being able to make their own use of the device prior to having to leave on the last flight out to their home world. In the scene, many of the other council heads are already present and seated at the table as Lugalis walks into the meeting room. He is about to take a seat at the table, but the 3D image of the chief Nephilim appears in the center of the table and the image sees Lugalis, points its right appendage at Lugalis, stiffing out to a long sharp point, like a sword or lance, and accuses Lugalis of malfeasance for failure to make appropriate progress. LG attempts to spurt out a defense and excuse, but the Nephilim continues to shout and demean him. Finally, the Nephilim finishes its rant and the display image winks out. The issue then, it being an aspect of KA society, is that such a rant normally carried a death sentence as a consequence. All of the other council heads at the conference table are squirming in their seats as their own progress, or lack of, might bring down a similar military dressing down. LG turns away and takes the next transport back to the surface. He makes his way into the hangar complex, now after hours when the work crews have gone for the day, and walks to the very end of the hangar opening to the outside. He is looking south out of the hangar towards the residence of the engineers. Contemplating suicide. Lugalis walks into the hangar from the east access corridor. At this time, the hangar is completely empty of workers and there is gloom in his heart and mind. He walks to the south outside opening of the hangar, near the west corner, and sits down with his legs hanging over the edge of the floor. He can easily see the lake waters at the bottom of the cliff face extending out south for about 80 yards. He thinks he is alone, but unawares to him, his wife Luker has been hiding in a wall recess and she follows him to the hangar opening. She also sits down on the floor to his left side and has her legs hanging over the ledge. Lugalis recognizes she is there and that there is little she can do to remedy the situation. Nevertheless, she places her right arm over his neck and shoulders and attempts to console him in his misery. She probably guesses that Lugalis is contemplating just jumping off of the ledge to his death in the waters below, rather than waiting for the Nephilim bosses to order his termination. Camera view is from behind them sitting at the edge, second outside the SW entrance looking to both LG and LK in a diagonal view. In the KA society, there was no excuse for failure when working for the Nephilim. A termination order carried with it the implicit termination of the entire family, generally siblings, and maybe even cousins and any other living parents. In some cases, the termination order would specify that a brother or cousins, should they have the technical expertise required for the work, would be spared, and installed as the acting engineer, or whatever. Luker knows all of this on her own. She does what she can. Neither are aware that a hidden angel has appeared to both of them further out beyond the opening of the hangar and is doing something with a wand. As it turns out eventually, the floor preparation is completed, a commissioning ceremony is held inside the hangar for all interested parties, KA council members, various Nephilim, one Pleiadian, and a collection of other aliens, some in spacesuits. One of the aliens is in a spacesuit that looks like an ice cream cone with a transparent half-sphere on top. While transparent, the hemisphere covering does not give good visibility of the alien's face or upper body. Lugalis officiates at the commissioning ceremony and gives thanks to his support staff. He welcomes all of the visitors to the event. This is of importance, like that given to launching an aircraft carrier or a major battleship in semi-modern day military activities. While the hangar floor preparations are important, the floor completion enables a next major progress step of bringing the transport device down from its parked position up by its peer device up in synchronous orbit. Bringing the device down had to be done in such a way that all of the delta V velocity and momentum in the device has to be bled off or dissipated in such a way that the body does not experience atmospheric re-entry deceleration with attendant heat production. The machine has anti-gravity capabilities and is essentially slowly lowered down to Earth in a controlled descent that covers several days of travel. The machine is not occupied by a pilot or captain, but is under the control of a staff device that the chief engineer owns and operates. There are still other hangar complex preparation chores to complete, but they progress while Lugalis prepares for the next major steps of the transport device installation. Note to readers, this is about half of the Lugalis story sketch out on the website in May 2025. There is still much to do to flesh out the storyline, but this should give you a taste of what is to come.